The helicopters in Operation Frequent Wind were heading for the American evacuation fleet lying off the coast of South Vietnam. A final battle was raging at Ton Son Airport on the edge of the capital. But although the advancing communists could see the American evacuation, they didn't interfere. A humiliating end to the American presence. Groups of looters began straggling past with goods stolen from abandoned American quarters. We tried to show our neutrality, the fact that we were not Americans, by fixing a Union Jack to our hired car.
10 minutes to 9 on the morning of the final American departure. The last Americans left the embassy complex about 25 minutes ago, and the fate of the embassy is very clear. It's now being systematically looted from floor to floor, and part of the building has been set on fire.
Soon the looters had swept through the intestines of the embassy, and the titbits which caught their fancy lay outside. The frenzy of looting went on, as if Saigon's consumer-mad people were extracting their own brassy revenge from the Americans, safely steaming off in the evacuation fleet. Saigon's waterfront, people lost their common sense and swarmed on board ships, hoping to make the journey down a river that had already fallen under the control of the communists. Soldiers began to destroy or change their identity cards. In old Saigon, there was always someone to sell a boat ticket to nowhere or a new identity. Such were the final moments of blind panic. Personal survival first. The lack of concern for the weakest and the helpless was never more apparent. Word of the surrender began spreading, and soldiers returned from the city's defence perimeter to shed weapons and uniforms. There were few commanders left. Most had talked or bought their way onto the American evacuation. A nash of a general pattern, the first North Vietnamese tank swept into Saigon. The men from the jungle had arrived. The last will and testament of Ho Chi Minh was being fulfilled. Though stricken with fear, the people of Saigon tried to react as if they all felt this was liberation. And the conquering tanks burst straight into the presidential palace. For the fourth time in a month, the presidential palace had new occupants. But these had come to stay. From start to finish, Operation Ho Chi Minh had lasted just 51 days. As we approached the palace, a communist officer came out carrying the flag of the old regime. There was no shortage of standard bearers for the Provisional Revolutionary Government. Inside, General Minh, president for only 36 hours, awaited the communist generals.
When did you first contact the National Liberation Front?
Stamping on the flag of the defeated army, the communist troops symbolically raised their own. It was time for President Minh's farewell to the palace, a man who had no option but to surrender Saigon or risk its destruction. As the palace surrendered, the first Viet Cong reached Trudeau Street, delirious with joy. For the first time in 20 years, the face of Ho Chi Minh was on display. By the end, South Vietnam's air superiority had disappeared. Any planes which lingered over Saigon were shot down by missiles. To no one's surprise, many troops in the Communist Expeditionary Force weren't sure of how to get to central Saigon. The people of the capital, now to be renamed Ho Chi Minh City, willingly guided their new masters.
This was our car. We started off the morning with the Union Jack. The Union Jack's still intact, but the car isn't. It was taken at gunpoint by a South Vietnamese army colonel, the man in charge of this sector of Saigon, and he was determined to die or to kill the North Vietnamese and communist troops who even now are advancing into Saigon. The car was a write-off because a North Vietnamese, a communist tank, ran right over it. This is all that's left.
3 divisions of North Vietnamese were pouring into the capital, but they overlooked one factor: appalling traffic jams. It was a new experience for the highly disciplined communist troops. They hadn't realised that the tidal wave of humanity sweeping alongside them into Saigon largely consisted of looters who had raided a granary. Most were South Vietnamese deserters. The defeated army did a striptease en masse, leaving their incriminating uniforms behind. Tons of weapons, rifles and equipment were collected in heaps by student volunteers. Millions of dollars worth of war supplies, much of it fresh from the United States to replace earlier losses. The American policy of Vietnamization had been swept into the dustbin of history. Of hysteria in Saigon about a possible bloodbath, it was heartening to see the Southerners trying to understand the conquering Northerners. Boy did meet girl. Generally, the troops were extraordinarily well behaved and shy. No one had expected such friendliness after the takeover. But then, the measure of the communist victory was so complete that their forces and cadres could afford to be lenient. Street urchins selling the emblem of the Provisional Revolutionary Government did marvellous business. It seemed prudent to fly the new flag ourselves on our hired car, because there was no way of getting official papers. On the main roads leading from the capital, there were huge traffic jams, too much for the student militia to handle. Spontaneously, without hindrance, thousands of people began returning to their homes. South Vietnam's own down-to-the-countryside movement was underway. Highway 4, leading southwest from Saigon, was littered with the debris of a defeated army. 3 South Vietnamese divisions disappeared in and around Saigon, leaving many of their vehicles. They ran out of fuel. A whole regiment had jumped out of its boots and melted away, the soldiers returning to their villages. HòA BÍNH, peace had come. The countryside itself in these early post-war days was strangely deserted, as if farmers were staying at home. So great was the rush back to the Delta that Highway 4 was frequently blocked. By now, the communists were ordering people to return to their villages all over Vietnam. Yet another North Vietnamese armoured unit found itself blocked by traffic, this time a long way from home in the middle of the Mekong Delta. Hanoi's arm was indeed long, but there was little fighting for the Delta. It fell into line as Saigon surrendered. The big towns in the Delta, like My Tho, were quickly back to normal as returning refugees poured off the buses.